I can't share screen though.
Oh, why not?
Because my stuff's on.
It's what?
It's on there.
Oh, to share the content. 18%.
Yeah, it's gonna be a while. Okay. How do I?
It's open. Yeah.
There's my chat. No.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. Excited about today's class. I'll be right back. All right. I had my coffee this morning. Get this situated here. So I'm teaching off of my iPad today because I had so many problems with my computer. It is in the Fix-It shop. So hopefully today we don't have any incidents of being kicked off. So I hope everybody had a really good week. I'm not going to get started quite yet because we're not at 9:30, but I thought I would just check in and see how everybody's doing. Did you make some progress on your business plan?
I'm doing great this morning.
Awesome. Good to see you, Susan.
Yeah, I had a mission statement, but I was working on just the planning on calls and things like that.
Awesome. You know that, and Georgie, that the business plan really does take several weeks to really hammer it out. It's a lot.
Yeah, I didn't know if that was something like, all right, I should have that by next Thursday, or
no, actually, that's the thing. It really does take a lot of time to think it out. And once you have a really solid plan from one year to the next, you can kind of tweak it when you know what worked, what didn't, and what things to do a little better. So we go through the same plan every year. Some of the things that I've added to the plan is the 90-day, do it, delete it, or dump it, or delegate it, because we all have things on our plate that kind of hold us back from moving forward. So that was something I thought, that was actually one of the Buffini things that I really liked that I put in there. The whole business plan, and actually this whole STAR program, is a compilation of what I really feel are the most effective lessons from so many different trainers. And I go way, way back to Tom Hopkins back in the mid 80s, and Danielle Kennedy. Danielle Kennedy went into business because she wanted to buy a new refrigerator. And so she ended up being one of the most successful people, but she had like 6 kids. She'd take them to all of her appointments, and she just wanted that new refrigerator, but she ended up being hugely successful and writing a book. And so she got her fridge, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, but awesome. It's interesting when you look at the people that have had an influence in your life. And a lot of people, when they come into real estate, they've either had an agent that was really, really good, or the opposite, one that was really bad. And they're like, I can do it better. Or they, somebody gives them a really good example, and they just, want to have that kind of a career. So usually we do have people that influence us. So today I'm super excited though to get buyers out of the way. We have a lot of buyers and we need more sellers, but here's the thing. Today we're going to talk about buyers in a more normal market, and I'm going to make some notations about things that just aren't happening right now because two things, the pandemic and also lack of inventory. So some of these things are not going to apply. Like you're probably not going to be able to go out and see 6 homes in a day. It's probably not going to happen right now. Do we even have 6 homes on the market? You know, so there's definite changes. But as we get started, like I said last week, all of these are recorded. And even if it kicks me off, I have it set so that the recording doesn't stop so that you can still get back to this and listen to it again as you want to, because there's so much material. It's really hard to just get it all in, 2 hours. So let me really quick, before we move on, let me go through what is actually in your materials today. And so you have quite a few items that were extra to print out. And so there's mostly scripts. So you've got some of the things we're going to talk about. And I normally get to share my screen, but I'm not because I'm on my iPad. So we'll go through a couple of the scripts together today. But in your materials, you've got your buyer expectations. Oh, and one thing I want to mention, all of these that are PDFs, I'm going to send you the editable version later so that you can actually put your own logos, your own company names and group names and office information on them so that you are not working off of just the star examples. You can take these and customize them all. So you'll get all of this. But so what you've got in your materials today are your buyer expectations. And we'll talk about that because you do have to set some expectations there, like not going to builders without you and not going to for sale by owners without you. The 5-star customer service experience, which is a great way to talk to your buyers about how you're really going to service them at a high level. The scripts you have in here are your pre-qual and pre-approval, and just really making sure that your clients understand the difference. Floor time script so that you have a good system. So if you're on floor and you get some good calls or some drop-ins, that you're able to convert those. Your lead phone consultation, and we'll actually go through that. That's like when somebody calls you either on a sign or when you're on floor or something gives you an opportunity to convert somebody. So we're going to go through that conversation. Then we'll go through the buyer needs analysis. So those two are the ones I planned on sharing screen, but you have them in your materials and so do I. So we'll go through them that way. And then buyer exclusivity and objections. And we'll talk about that. That's when you go in to get your buyer agency and actually they object to signing off exclusively with you and how you can address that. And then the under contract checklist that is really helpful in just getting everything that you need to have done, especially when you're newer in the business. Those checklists are so helpful because usually it's your first few times of actually going through all of the processes. So with that, let's talk about buyers. So the reason that buyers are such a great opportunity for agents that are newer in the business is because they're usually easier to find than sellers. They typically are easier, they're easily hunted. They want to work with agents. They like to go to open houses. They make themselves known. And so finding buyers is typically easier than it is to find sellers, especially in a market that's the opposite. So in a seller's market like we have now, we have a really strong seller's market right now. It's harder to find sellers. In a buyer's market, when you have a super strong buyer's market and lots of listings and it's hard to find a buyer that's ready, willing, and able, it's harder to find buyers. So that's just the par for the course. Whatever it is that you're probably going to get paid the fastest is the hardest to find. And that's life. So the reason that we have really good systems for real estate is to help us to navigate the ups and downs. And so finding buyers, typically you find them at open houses, which are really hard right now. We don't have a lot of inventory. Sign calls can be a good way of finding buyers. And again, floor time is challenged because we don't have a lot of inventory, and you have to have inventory for people to call on. So we have to be really creative. And we've got some tools that we'll talk about that will really help you to identify buyers that are making themselves known through artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. And again, it is why your database is so important, because that's your resource where you're going to find people too. One of the reasons that buyers, and this is especially true when we don't have quite as tight of a market as we do now, but buyers take less time. I mean, less money. They take more time, less money. So on average, you'll work with a seller for about 8 hours of total. If you were to time and track all of the time you spent with them, you'd spend about 8 hours. A buyer is about 40 hours, and that is in a normal market. And so if you imagine that you're going to be with a buyer in a normal market and spend 40 hours, you're probably going to have to at least add 20 or 30% right now for the many houses and many offers they'll probably have to write. So buyers do take a little bit longer right now than they normally would. But as a general rule, they take longer. You're going to spend more time, but they take less of a financial investment. With the buyer, you're not having to market the property and do some of the tours and the things that you would do with a seller. And we'll talk all about sellers next week. Buyers, it says, in your book, it says buyers can provide funds quickly. Typically, that's true. When you get a buyer under contract, then you go through the motions and you get to closing. Right now, I can honestly say a listing is a paycheck and a buyer is difficult. So if any of you are out there working with buyers, you've got active people, it's hard right now. We just don't have the inventory. I know that our closings are way down for the first of the year. So we're really hoping as spring comes that we get more inventory, because sellers really have a hard time being buyers when they don't think they're going to be able to find something. They don't want to sell their property. So where do you find them? There's really that's the big question. Where are we going to find the next buyer? Where are we going to find the next client? And NAR statistics that we reviewed last week showed us that 40% of buyers are using a referral. And so that means that you absolutely want to make sure that your database knows that you work with buyers and that you are not too busy to help them, and that you'll go the extra mile. And you've got to have that ability to really sell yourself, because they need somebody right now that's a good negotiator. A buyer needs a good agent to get into a property right now. And so by being that agent and really helping them with all of their negotiation skills in making the right offer and the right request, you are their ticket to getting a house. Because if they were out there on their own right now, they probably would just get frustrated and quit. It's so hard on buyers. I just think it would be really hard to be a first-time buyer right now. But there's houses, and we're still going to sell them, and we're going to stay in the game until we win. That's the game. So other places you find. So referral obviously is number one. And that's why it's so important that you do develop your sphere of influence in your database, and you continue to remind them that you are their real estate resource, because you want them to think of you. Every time somebody's talking about buying a house, they're talking about their agent. You want them to think of you. Say, oh, do you have a good agent? I have a great agent. I'd love to give you their name if you ever need to know. You want that person out there being your advocate. So referrals are hugely important, and that's why you have to remind people every 16 days that you are their resource. And that is getting back to your business plan from last week, that sphere of influence plan, where you've got 12 texts or emails, 12 printed mails, you've got a quarterly lumpy mail and a quarterly phone call. That's how you stay top of mind. So if you don't already kind of have some of that figured out, continue to work on that. And I'm always happy to help you one-on-one too. Floor time, opportunity time, whatever it is in your office. We have really good opportunity time in the Westminster office because of our location. People will even stop by. We get a lot of walk-ins there. And some of the other offices I know have really good floor time too. So that is a great opportunity. The only caveat I would say is that if we don't have the listings for people to call on, then we're not going to be able to have very active floor time, because we need to have that inventory for them to call on. And so that can definitely be a challenge right now. We need inventory so bad. So hopefully that will be something that we see more of coming in this spring, is just the opportunity to have some more listings coming on the market. Usually March 1st is like the #1 listing day of the year. So hopefully that will happen. I know of a lot of people I've talked to have business coming up. So I have every reason to expect that that's going to be the case. Okay, so then the next thing, open houses. And who's been able to do an open house in the last, have you really? That's great. How did it go?
Oh, I'm not on mute. Good to know. It went great. I've been doing open houses about every other weekend. They're hard to find because there's not a lot of inventory out there, and a lot of agents are doing their own open houses right now. But I had a great one last week, and I picked up 3 new clients, showed some of them yesterday, showing another one today, and showing the other ones on Sunday. So it was fantastic. It was a great open house.
That is awesome. That is great to hear. You know, the biggest problem we have right now with open houses are just having the inventory. So many people go under contract and then they cancel them because they don't want people in their house. Even pre-pandemic, they didn't cancel. They'd still let us do the open house so that we could market. But now if they don't have to have people in there, they're like, no. So it is what it is. But that's really good news, Elizabeth.
Yes.
So what area of town, where do you work?
I am actually at RE/MAX Alliance Boardwalk in Fort Collins.
Fort Collins.
And I was doing an open house in Old Town Fort Collins.
Awesome. Well, I love open houses. I completely built my business on open houses.
I have
to. I mean, they're awesome. So I'm really glad we can have them, that they didn't take them away, but the challenge is finding the properties. But when we do our 4th module, we're going to cover how to really rock an open house. And I would tell you, if you see open houses out there, stop if you can. And just look at what the other agent is doing, how they engage you, and what it looks like, how prepared they are for their open house, because that's your competition. Buyers, statistically, they look online for properties. They go out to open houses to meet agents, and they want to find the right one. So they need us. And so you want to shine. If they're going to open houses and they're going to 5 or 6 a day, you want to be the one that they choose. And that means that you're always going to have a follow-up. But that we'll leave that for module 4. We'll talk about that. Sign calls are another really great way to find buyers. And that's really tough if you don't have listings, though. And so, you know, a lot of listing agents, they are busy with their listings. They don't really work with a lot of buyers. And you can look in your offices to see if there are agents who would like you to return those calls. Sometimes those calls just burn up and never get returned. Somebody that calls on a listing may never get a return call. And it's important that it happens like within 15 or 30 minutes. So if there are people in your office, you know, they really focus on listings, you might talk to them about helping them with their sign calls and offer to pay like a 25% referral fee if they pass their sign calls on to you. And it closes. So that's another way that you can find business. And if anybody speaks, usually it's Spanish in Colorado, but there's other languages too that we're seeing really emerge. And if you have that skill, be sure that people know that, because you can really help somebody that doesn't have that skill, that needs you to you know, follow up. And I've even had people before that had sign writers made that say, you know, se habla español, and then they can call that number to get the information in Spanish. So sign calls are a really great way to find business. And then new conversations. And I would say that, you know, new conversations, when you're looking at your homework, it's hard to do those 2 new conversations every day, you guys. Really hard. And so if you can get 1 or 2 new people, new conversations a week, you're really hitting it. I have it per day just to stretch. But one of the things you want your RE/MAX pin on so that people can ask you about real estate. And if you don't have your RE/MAX pin, you can order like a name tag is a really good thing too. Recognition Express for about $20. You can get a name tag of any style. You can get it blingy or you can get it plain, depending on what it is that you prefer. But having that on, it's like if you go to a listing and there's no sign in the yard, then you really don't know much about that property. You don't even know if that's the right property. And so when you put your pin on, whether you go to the store or wherever you are in your scene, it's like having your sign in your yard. and people will ask you questions. And so be ready when you put your brand on to be the realtor. And honestly, if you don't want to, don't put your pin on when you go to the store and stuff. You know, put your hat on and go incognito if you don't want anybody, you know, if you want to be off, because otherwise we're pretty much on all the time, right? We want to find buyers wherever we can. There was this one gal that she was amazing, the team Seibel, and she's not with us anymore. Brandon Seibel, her son, took over the team, but Ruth Seibel was the most amazing lead generator I ever met. She would take her cards. So she went to the gym every day, and she had her business cards in a baggie, and she would take them in the sauna. She would take them in everywhere she went. She was drumming up business. And I mean, she could be in the line at Taco Bell and find a client. That she just did not have any fear with that. But I can tell you that her car was a mess, and her desk was too. She was certainly not a perfect person, but she was a perfect lead generator. So remember that. You just talk to people. Somebody just said, I saw coming through on the chat, I talk to anyone I can. And absolutely, that is really important. And sometimes it's uncomfortable. And if you're one of those people that feels a little uncomfortable talking to people about a business that you're in sales, there is a book called Sell with Soul. It's a great book. And it really helps you to reach out to your friends without feeling cheesy and salesy. So that's something that some styles of people are uncomfortable with. And some people aren't. Some people just go for it. But you have to be you. And so there's no right or wrong. You just have to have the right way. And so Susan just said she speaks French and Spanish. Well, that must be good, Susan. You get a lot of referrals that way?
Absolutely none.
Well, now make sure that everybody knows. So on your profiles everywhere. So absolutely. And you know, Colorado is a destination location around the world. So make sure that your profile is well developed on the remax.net site. That's where they will find you if they're in France or Spain.
I sent a referral to a lady in our office that speaks Spanish because there was no reason for me to try to handle the whole entire deal. I just referred it out. So, you know, just make yourself known.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So that is a great way.
Will do.
Go ahead.
You said the name of that book was Sell with Soul?
Yes, Sell with Soul.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
And I wish I had it in front of me, but if you Google it, you'll see it. I don't have it in front of me, so I can tell you who the author is, but it's Sell with Soul, S-O-U-L. And it is all about reaching out to your friends and not being insincere. It really does help if you ever have that feeling of discomfort with that. So I like this quote by Freddie Roosevelt. Real estate cannot be lost or stolen, nor can it be carried away. Purchased with common sense, paid for in full, and managed with reasonable care. It's about the safest investment in the world. So that's kind of a cool thing. And one other thing that I want to mention, you know, as far as careers go, the ability to earn a very, very good living, sales is at the top of that list of careers. And real estate is at the top of the sales list. And so you are in a place right now where you can earn as much as you want. You decide what your ceiling will be and shoot for that. And you may not hit it, but you may come close your first year. Keep trying, because you absolutely can make it happen. We'll finish up with where you're going to find buyers. The number one is prospecting. Okay. So door knocking can be a great method. It's a little bit hard right now, but it works if you have something of value. That's the key with going around and knocking on doors, is to have something to give them that they actually want. And so some of the things that are highest on the list of things that people want are statistics for the neighborhood, and also just statistics on improvements and things they can do. So you can go into the cost versus value report that is done by NAR every year, and it's costvsvalue.com. And by the way, the NAR NAR's RPR, the Real Property Resource, uses that cost versus value report to evaluate repairs and improvements and what they would be worth. So it's a really cool little piece of information you can take out to people, and you can get them a link so that they can see the entire report. But what it tells is, like, if you were going to do like a kitchen remodel and you were going to invest, let's say a low amount or a medium remodel or a really high level remodel, it would tell you what you would expect to recoup on that. And for a kitchen, it's like about 72%, which really helps when you're going out and you're talking to people about what they can afford and what they should expect. So if you're talking to a seller right now and they think they should redo the bathroom, and you can show them the report, and it's like, well, you're probably only going to get about 80% of your investment. You're probably better off just reducing the price a little bit and having a competitive situation. So those are all strategies. But that report, it is done by NAR, but it actually is a separate website, costvsvalue.com. And you'll find it there. And you go into Colorado and into it's done by region. And it's done by surveys with local agents. You might have the opportunity to do one of those sometime in the area. So that's how they get all the information. So warm or cold calling is also a really good way to find business. Cold calling was never one of my favorites, so I always like to make it warm. If I'm going to do something, I'll just give you an example. Let's say that I want to build a relationship with a target group that I'm working towards. So I might send them an item of value. Let's say I send them an invitation to our shred event, and then I call them to make sure they got it. So that call is now warm. Instead of just calling out of the blue, I have a reason. So I've made it warm. And you can do that with almost any database. You can think of something of value to provide and then follow up with a warm call. So that's something that is just a strategy. I'm not a big one for cold calls, although there are people that can sit down and call 200 people till they get a deal, and rejection doesn't really affect them nearly as much. So it depends on your style. I'm a relationship builder. So that's where I come from. So here's a tool that we use that I think is a really awesome tool that you might consider, especially once you get some money coming in. Have you heard of First.io? It is a program, and it uses artificial intelligence and predictive analytics. It follows 79 plus different points of data when people are online and they're looking at things. So it looks at all the contacts in your phone. So you go into First.io after you've integrated your contacts, and they do it on their end when you sign up for it, and you send in your CRM and everything. So everybody's in your First.io app, and that way it tells you, but 1 star, 2 stars, or 3 stars if that person is interested or looking at real estate right now. And it's very, very, it's really accurate. And so we are able to go on there and see our database and kind of have a pretty good idea who to call. Statistically, First.io will reduce the calls that you need to make to find your next client from 20 calls to 7. Just by telling you who's most likely to be doing real estate. I think it costs $50 a month, maybe. And by the way, it is an awesome tool. It is so awesome. It used to be available to all of the industry, and then RE/MAX bought the rights to it. And so only RE/MAX agents can actually have First.io now. And I've had agents that actually came over from other companies because they didn't want to give it up. At the end of their contract, they were going to have to let it go. And so that has been a huge tool. And it's really cool. It'll update email addresses and stuff also for you. It's an awesome tool. And so if somebody in your contact base goes and buys through somebody else, it also tells you that. So it's kind of like, oh man. But it also congratulates you when you get one. So like when you do a closing, it's like, congratulations, you got that. So it's amazing how much information it actually knows. You wouldn't want to call people and tell them you're stalking them, but actually you do know everything. Like if, you know, people are going to increase the size of their family or decrease the size of their family, they're usually looking online. They look at colleges, they look at baby stuff. You know, it takes into consideration how much equity people have. It takes into consideration how long they've lived there. You know, there's 79 points of data, like I was saying, that actually it can recognize. So first.io, if you want to check it out, you just go to the website and it's first.io, and you'll see it is a really cool tool, and you can only get it as a RE/MAX agent. And we use it. We really love it. And then, you know, prospecting, that's when you get to reach out and have a two-way conversation. There's marketing and there's advertising. And you've got to have that message for your reputation, but that usually isn't going to get your deal, you know, to you know, your next paycheck. And so if you go out to the grocery store and you purchase the shopping carts there, don't expect your phone to ring, because it's not going to. The only thing that you're going to do is get a marketing message out there. And so you would only do that when you had the money to spend and it was in a geographical area where you want to make a name for yourself. And that's a really good reason to do it, is for that brand. But it's just know that it's money spent, not money in, when you do something like that. Had somebody once that told me the story about a lady that went out and spent $40,000 on a billboard, an actual billboard in a town, and it was in another city, but never did get a single lead from that. So it's a marketing message. Yeah, everybody knew who she was, but it didn't actually bring in a lead. So your prospecting is your number one form of gaining business, and your marketing message is your secondary form. It just backs up your prospecting message. So it's wonderful when we can mail people things and we don't have to actually pick up the phone and call, but just know that that is marketing. That's just making sure they know you. So that's where you find them. And it's, you know, everybody usually knows about 200 people. So if you have a database that you are, you know, building those relationships with, then the chances of you having to pound the pavement and always looking for buyers after your first couple of years are very slim. You build your database and you will get about 80% coming to you instead of you always having to hunt. So that's why I really, you know, just hit that home. Your database is your foundation, and you can't build a house without a foundation. So let's just say now you've got an appointment and you're going to go and you're going to consult with this buyer, or somebody's calling you on the phone and you want to make sure that you're doing a good job of converting them. So I'm going to, instead of sharing screen, I'm going to grab my notebook here. Unfortunately, I can't share screen right now. Okay. The good thing is when this computer's fixed, it's going to work again. So in your materials, you've got the lead consult. And really, that's just what you're going to use when somebody calls you on the phone. And what I really want to point out is a strategy that really helps. So when you're on the phone, sometimes it feels really uncomfortable when you're trying to look something up on the computer and you've got somebody on the other end on hold. And you've got that time pressure and it's taking a while. So to totally circumvent that discomfort, I just say to people, you know, it's going to take me a few minutes. I'm going to look this up for you. Do you mind if I call you right back? And 99% of the time they're going to say, yeah, no problem. And then I get their phone number. So that is one strategy that I always use when I'm on floor. So once I actually am able to have a conversation with the person, and I might be asking these questions while I'm looking up the property, but it's just harder to multitask like that. So these are the kind of questions you want to ask. Things like, oh, so you said you're in the market to buy, or, oh, so you're in the market to buy. You know, it just, you know, making it clear. How long have you been looking for properties? Has an agent taken you out to see any properties? Are you working with an agent? If yes, are you under an agreement? That's a very important question. Do you have an agreement with another agent? Have you been using any online resources? And that's really helpful because you'll find out that people have been using like maybe Zillow, which is a little more accurate now that they have the IDX feed, but some of those are very outdated resources. And so you want to make sure to get them in to your portal when you have that opportunity. But anyway, so you find out where they've been looking. Is there anyone else buying the home with you? You want to make sure you know who the buyer is. And then asking motivation. Well, I'm interested. Why do you want to move? Are you renting now or do you own? That tells you that you need to, talk to them about what's going to happen with that current property. Are you planning to use a mortgage? And then you're going to want to go into the pre-qual. How soon would you like to be there? So these are pretty basic questions, but they're important questions. You don't have to have a huge script. You just have to have the right one. And if everything looks like it's going in the right direction, then you close for the appointment. And you really would like to get face-to-face with these people so that you can start building rapport. Meet for coffee. A lot of times they like to do that rather than meeting at the office. I like to get them to the office. It is the safest place if you can get them to the office, but coffee is also a great place. Meeting it, and I've met a ton of people at Starbucks and different places like Village Inn and stuff when that used to be around, but and before the pandemic, of course. We haven't been meeting for coffee that much this last year, but that's of course changing. So really you just want to ask really good questions, find out if they are truly motivated, if they're qualified, if they're working with another person, because you're looking at the three items that really make somebody either an A client, a B, or a C. So they're an A client if they have all three. They're motivated, they're loyal, and they're qualified. So you're always looking for those. If they're missing any one of those, they're a B. If they're missing two of them, they're a C. And if they're none of them, they're a D for dump. So if they're not qualified, not motivated, and not loyal, then it's probably not somebody that you want to go forward with. And so that's really what you're trying to identify, if this is a person that's an opportunity for you. So once you've done that, you're going to want to find out if they're pre-qualified or pre-approved, and hopefully you've been able to meet with a lender or an HMA person to understand that process. When they put you through a pre-qual, it's just saying if everything that this person told me is true, they would qualify. But when you are pre-approved, it's actually putting that person through the credit approval, and it's just pending the house. You can't have a completely approved buyer until you have a house, though. Because the house is part of the process. But having that total credit underwriting behind you gives you a much stronger offer when you're working with that buyer. And a lot of times you might want a second opinion too. If they've gone out and let's say they have a lender and you're just not really sure about that lender, you want to call that lender. But sometimes you might want to go and get a second opinion too. And that is something that your HMA people will do in your offices. They will help you with that second opinion. I was just out, I think it was Lennar, where I was this last weekend, where they have to have a second opinion by their lender, even if they're not using their lender in order to go under contract. So, that's something that you can do and your sellers can require if you're not comfortable with the lender. And that's another conversation. Jessica's going to do the mortgage class, but just knowing that when you go to make your offers, that lender needs to be available for the listing agent to call. And they need to be local. If they're not local, they need to be like hyper available and almost, to the point where there's no objection in their location, and that they understand Colorado rules and those types of things. When I see an out-of-state lender or something like that comes up, and on one of our listings, I always want to double check, because they may not know our market. They may not know how difficult it is. And if you have a lender that doesn't understand our market, although it's pretty tight all over the country, but let's say they are like, oh, the seller will extend it. Well, what if you have a lender that automatically assumes, and I've had this happen before, assumes that if they're running late, the seller will extend it. Well, actually the seller has a backup offer that's higher and they're not going to extend it. They're not going to do anything. And that lender can cost you the deal. So you want to make sure you have a good lender. And that's enough about that. So when you actually get to meet with the buyer, this is where you're really selling yourself. And I've done a lot of Zoom meetings with buyers over this last year, but it's really the same. You're developing that rapport, and so these are the things that you want to really look for when you're doing your consultation. You want to be really specific and ask those directed questions. Don't assume. And if they say they want a big yard, ask why. You know, ask questions deep to make sure you understand exactly what they're looking for. And be sure to ask about their household, not their family. That's just a, you know, anti-discrimination protection. If you ask about their household instead of their family, it is just a better word to use. And then, and again, never assume, asking for clarification on everything that they tell you. And then what else is important to them? Because the whole process is going to be more educational at the beginning. You're going to ask them, you're going to find out what they think. But that saying you've heard, buyers are liars, I hate that saying. I just say buyers don't know what they don't know until you take them out there and educate them. And so you'll find out these things, but just keep in mind, you're going to take them, you're going to listen, you're going to learn as you're taking them out there and showing them some property. But the buyer needs analysis. And I want to just go through this a little bit. Normally in class, we do this as a, you know, a partner exercise, which role playing, which is probably a little more stressful and probably a little more effective than just going through it together. Everybody loves to role play. You know, that's how I always get people out of the back and towards the front is when I'm in a class, and I'll put a little sign in the back saying this is the role play section. And then everybody sits at the front of the room. But anyway, role playing is important though. And I would recommend that you do role play these scripts with somebody that you're feeling comfortable with in your family, or, you know, even kids and things like that. So, so just going through the buyer needs analysis, and I'm just going to do this briefly. So tell me about yourselves, and then you listen. You're going to want to talk 25% of the time, and that's to ask the questions and let them talk 75% of the time. And that is how you build rapport. The more they talk, the better your rapport. Just know that. So what are some of the reasons for making a move? So you're looking for motivation. Oh, is that right? What price range are you looking for? When do you need to be there? How long have you been looking? What will you do if you don't find a new home by your deadline? People will go from pain faster than they go to pleasure, by the way. So when you're really trying to help somebody make a decision, you have to remind them of the thing that causes them the pain. Like you'll be out of your parents' basement in 3 weeks. You know, it's probably better than, oh, look at how pretty this place is, right? So if you think about it that way. Who will be living in the home you purchase? I mean, that's a way of asking about the household. It's like, well, actually, it's going to be me and my 6 kids. That tells you a lot. Do you have any pets? And that's important because there are actually some areas where there are limitations on pets and things like that. So you have to be careful about that. Does your home need to accommodate any special needs? It's a great way of asking them if there are any, you know, disabilities that you need to know about or special needs. What do you enjoy doing at home? That's a great question because, you know, if they're entertainment or they like to cook and things like that, then you're going to be looking at those spaces differently. If they like to tinker in the garage, you're going to look at that differently. Let's say you've got somebody who likes to sew the craft. So understanding them at a higher level is going to help you find the right house. Have they narrowed their focus to any area or community? I don't know about you guys, but you watch HGTV? It's fun to watch. I like it. And yes, it's staged and we know all that. But you notice how they almost always go for location? Even if he finds the perfect house, they always stick with her and location. They want to stay in that neighborhood, so they keep their house. Happens all the time. It's always a location. So if they know where they want to live, it doesn't matter how great the house is. Normally, you're just going to want to find it where it is they want to be, because that's where they're going to buy. And then you know, what do you like about that area or about that community? And you're going to find out if it's the schools, they have friends there, whatever it is, the neighborhood has, you know, block parties or whatever it is that's important to them, you'll find out. And then tell me about your ideal home. How many bedrooms, baths? What's important about your kitchen? What kind of floor plan do you like? And this is interesting. Do you know that most buyers will buy the same floor plan that they grew up in as a kid? They're just attached to it. So if you find out that they grew up in a ranch, they're probably going to like ranches. But if you find out they grew up in like a tri-level or even a bi-level, that's probably what they're going to like. So it's an interesting question to ask. What other rooms would you like to have? Now, this is important right now. And this was written pre-pandemic, but now they're going to tell you they want an extra space for the office for when they need to work at home. They want a large pantry. They need flex space to do schooling, and the house has become more of a sanctuary than a place to sleep. So that we're hearing over and over again. Does a fireplace matter? Now in Colorado, that's kind of a good question. I'm getting it less and less though, but it used to be everybody wanted a fireplace here. It was a big deal. But now it's more like air conditioning. They want that air conditioning. Does a basement matter? How do you feel about yard size? And you're going to find out about that. What about your vehicles and toys? I had somebody where we had to go, and the first thing we had to do was measure the garage because their truck was so long that we had to make sure it would fit in the garage. So that was one of the very first things we ever had to do in the house. So it's important to know that stuff. Then I know another story over in Meadow Glen that is, it's an Arvada neighborhood. You're not allowed to park your vehicles just on the street and in your driveway. And I know of a story where somebody bought a house there and their truck didn't fit in the garage and they had to either sell the house or get rid of the truck. And they were really mad at their agent. So that's just one of those things that can happen. So you want to make sure that those things that you cover, vehicles, toys, covenants. Now, my favorite part are the top 5 must-haves, and you got to have each person. If you've got more than one person as a buyer, you have to have them each do this because they're not necessarily going to be the same. And then I like to find out if they could be really wowed, what would be something that they would want in their dream home? Because if I can find 4 out of the 5 and a dream home item, I can usually help them make that decision. If it doesn't hit on any level, then it's not. But that list, we always go back to that top 5 list. So, and the dream item as you're showing and helping people with their decisions. So that's why I think it's one of my favorite things. And once you know what somebody's top 5 things are, you really know how to find them and how to wow them with that dream home thing. So anyway, that is a really good needs analysis script, and you'll make it your own. I just want you to understand the longer you spend in needs analysis and making sure you understand what it is that your client is really looking for, the less time you're going to spend out there looking in the field. You're going to find the right property. And some people really do want you to find it. They don't want to find it themselves. A lot of people like being online, but they expect you to be part of that process. And so, you're going to know when you find it. You're going to know when you find the right one, when you know your person well enough and you've done that needs analysis. So have you ever had that where you've got the top 5 things and you had the opportunity to remind them? Because this is what you're going to do. When you're out there showing and you've got those, you can say, okay, this house has this, it has the chef's kitchen. It's got the large pantry. It's got the extra flex space. And it's got the basement, but the basement's not finished. And I know that you wanted a finished basement, but it has that big yard that you wanted. That was your dream thing. Do you think you could finish the basement if you could get everything else? And they're like, yeah, I think we could. So that is typically how you will use that to help them with the decision. And they do want your help with the decision. That is why they hire you, not just to show them properties, because if that was all that we did, then they can go find their own property. But our work really comes in with the decision making. And once the contract is signed, that's when our work really, really comes in and we earn our fee. So you've got now a pretty good idea of doing the needs analysis, and you're doing that when you meet with your people, but your buyer presentation, and I will say it's a little bit more difficult during the pandemic because they don't want us providing a lot of paper items, but putting together something that you can leave with them it's a nice reminder of what you talked about. It's not at all the most important. The most important thing is your needs analysis, asking good questions and listening, because that's when they really feel that you are the right person for them. If they feel that you're listening and you hear what it is they're looking for. But here's a good example on page 5 of some things that you might put in a buyer package. And some of these things are in your materials as far as the customer service experience and those things. The buyer guide, I actually usually email the buyer guide out of the vault, or we also have our own that we've done. But that's a great pre-appointment item to send. Then they can look through that and get together some questions and things for your meeting. And all you need to do is go to the vault and go into those marketing links, and you can email that buyer guide right to your clients. And it's got tons of good information there. The seller guide is in there too. We also use that one as a pre-listing tool. So it gives them all kinds of stuff to read and good questions to ask. If you know where they're going, neighborhood information, city information, all those types of things are great to have. If you ever have to go to the airport and pick somebody up, they have a huge kiosk full of little flyer thingies. Just pick some up. And I always just sort of take a few. I never, like clean them out or anything, but I take a few here and there, and I keep my stock up that way. And that makes great relocation packages too, when you can get some of that stuff. I recommend that you do a personal brochure or a bio. And you can go to breakthroughbroker.com. They've got some great templates. Breakthrough Broker is a free service, and they've got some really good stuff. So if you haven't been on there, I recommend that you go join and get a login and look at some of the stuff they've got, because they've got tools that you can use right out the door. And the personal brochure is one of those. Your expectations, and that, with a buyer, your expectation, you're going to have to tell them that if they go to new homes without you, that it's very possible you won't be able to represent them. If they go to, see properties without you, even at open houses, they should at least have your cards if they're going to go to open houses without you. But set those expectations. If they're not going to be available, if they're going on vacation and you're looking every day, make sure that you set that expectation too, because you could still be looking and find the perfect property, and then they're not available to see it. I did fire a buyer once that never could be available to go see the perfect properties. And I would be over there, and I would find the property, go get the permission to do the video, send the video, and they would never see them. And pretty soon I'm like, you know what? I think that probably you're not at a place where you're ready to purchase a home. And actually that lady is the dress lady over at Dillard's, and she's still there, and she still hasn't moved. It's been like 5 years. Anyway, economic snapshots, you can get those out of the vault too. They're awesome tools. You can also put somebody on a drip campaign so that they'll just automatically receive the economic snapshot. It's a monthly update of the area. It's a great thing to put in your package. Testimonials written, if you have those that you can do. If you don't have any testimonials from real estate, reach out to some of your friends and the people that you know and get them to write some testimonials about your character. That will work just fine. Until you have your real estate testimonials. Relocation materials are great. You can get things from the chamber. And like I said, those kiosks at different hotels are a great place to get relocation materials. I go to the rec centers to get like the rec center, the activity guides and things for my packages. Moving checklist, there's one in your package that's really good. And also disclosures, like the lead-based paint disclosure and the seller's property disclosure. Those are great things to put in those packets so that they can see really some of the complicated forms that they're going to have to be dealing with. And it helps to really just solidify their understanding that they need you as their agent. So that's a nice package, and you'll make it your own. The most important thing is your value proposition, though, and we talked a little bit about that and your mission statement, and then I gave you the exercise, the unique value proposition exercise, which is super helpful in articulating what your value is. But there's 3 things that buyers look for, and this is what you really want to make sure that they understand. Buyers are looking for market knowledge, so you want to show them that you know the areas that they're looking in. They want ease of communication. You have to be pretty easy to get a hold of. Text is usually the easiest way. If you just use voicemail, then you have to call and get the voicemail. But you want them to set those expectations, because some people don't text. If you have somebody that is not a texter, then that's not how you're going to receive their information. So that's an expectation you want to set. Ease of communication. And it doesn't matter how they communicate. It's their form of communication. So you want to find out their best way of communication and then show them how their way is going to be easy for them with you. That makes sense? They're gonna say, oh, I don't do phone calls, I just text. Well, that's not gonna win you over somebody that just wants you to call. You know what I mean? So you got to find out what they want and serve them in that capacity. And your negotiation skills, that's our number one thing. We are negotiators. If they just had to pick a house and everything went smoothly, they wouldn't really need us. But that is where our value comes in, is because we do know how to negotiate. And there's a lot of points of negotiation through the contract between the inspection and the appraisal, and it's working with all the different key players in the deal. So you want them to see you as a great negotiator. And that's why you need those testimonials. So you want two types of things in your packet. So you want your numbers. So you want to know, and this is especially important for sellers, your average days on market, list price to sales price, those types of things that sellers want to know. With a buyer, you might want to know how quickly you're able to get them under contract. Statistically, I'll get a buyer under contract within 3 weeks if they're serious and they're looking. So those types of things will help you to set expectation as far as your numbers. And then you have testimonials for the people who are more interested in what somebody says. So for those data-oriented people, they need numbers. For those people that are more relationship oriented, they need testimonials. And usually if you're working with two people, you'll have one of each. So it's good to have both, your numbers and your testimonials. And so you've built rapport, you've met with them, you've gone through the needs analysis, you're feeling pretty good. You've shown them how that you're going to be able to provide the market knowledge they need. You're available for them, and you're going to get them the best possible deal that they can get through your negotiation skills. And if that all looks good, then you say, do you have any other questions for me? And just explain, when you work with somebody, you work with them exclusively, and are they ready to hire you? I would like the job of being your realtor. And if they're ready to go, then that's when you're going to just go ahead and get your buyer agency signed, and they hire you. And so now let me just mention, it's kind of hard sometimes to just put the buyer agency out there. And I do want you to talk to your brokers about this, but what the Real Estate Commission requires is that you provide the disclosure of relationships at this point when you're having this needs analysis conversation, so that they understand. Now, what I do when somebody says yes, we'd like to hire you to be our agent, I'll say, okay, well, this is how I like to work with people. I want to be your advocate. And that means I would be your buyer's agent. And so I can do my best job for you. And that is this one on the sheet, buyer's agent. So if you are in agreement that you would like me to be your buyer's agent, yes, we would, then we're going to sign that buyer agency agreement when we write our contract. But right now we have the agreement that I'm going to work as your buyer's agent. So you have implied, by default, we're a transaction broker. If you are uncomfortable getting that buyer's agency signed the very first meeting, just tell them, get their agreement and get it signed the next time when you do the offer. But make sure you've gone through the disclosure of relationships so that they understand all of the different relationships, and you will have met the Real Estate Commission's requirement. Okay, so I know that some people are just really worried about getting that, sign here, I can't help you until you agree that I'm your agent. That is a tough one. But you do have to explain relationships. And then once you get their agreement that you are going to be their agent, then you are obligated for all of the things a buyer agent has agreed to do, even if you don't have it in writing. Yeah. So you're obligated. So anyway, and you can talk to your own managing brokers about that. That's just how I do it. Handling objections. So and this is during the part where you're trying to get them to hire you as their agent, they might say, well, we really think we might get a better deal if we just go in, straight to the listing agent. It's like, well, that is an option to go straight to the listing agent, but you understand that the listing agent normally works for the seller. And if you want somebody to be your advocate, then you have to have a realtor of your own. Or they may say, we really just don't want to sign an agreement with anybody, and we'll just go see properties as they come up with the listing agent. And then you might just say, well, then, I'm not going to be able to help you. And this is a hard thing to do. It's like, because when I work with a buyer, I work with them exclusively. And I'm going to give you my time, and I'm going to give you attention that you need to find that right home. But I do require your exclusive loyalty as well. And so if you're not able to sign this agreement with me, then I'm not going to be able to work with you. But I wish you the best of luck in finding your home, and let them go. If they are not loyal, then don't give them your time. And even when you're new, if they're not going to be loyal to you, then unless you just really want the experience of running around, I wouldn't go out of my way for somebody that wouldn't agree for me to be their agent. Okay. There's no point of work that you're going to be able to do where you've earned it and they'll finally hire you. You just have to draw that line in the sand and set that expectation that you only have about maybe time to work with 3 or 4 buyers at a time. If you're going to take them on, you actually are reducing your ability to make money in any other area. And that's why you need that loyalty, because we don't get paid till it gets closed. And if you give all your time to people that aren't going to close, you're not going to make any money, right? So you have to draw that line. It's harder, but you get better at it as you get burned. Hopefully you won't. I say that lightly, but we all do. And when it happens, you only are allowed one day to sulk and then move on. Okay. That's a rule. One day. Okay. So now let's just say you've overcome the objections. They're hiring you. They want you to be their realtor. Now you want to set some expectations for the process. So they're your client now. You're going to find them a house. So you need to know the best information you can. Make sure you understand the financing completely. They've talked with the lender, but make sure you know if they're in a situation where they need to ask for closing costs. No, that's not good in this market. They need to talk to their lender about maybe taking a little bit higher fee and have lender pay closing costs instead of seller pay. There are things that you can do to make that happen, but it's not probably going to come from the seller in this market. So talk to the lender to make those things happen. And you really want to know all of the pieces. If they can go conventional, then you probably don't want to try FHA because FHA is harder to get. So just make sure you understand everything in the current market. The contracts are extremely important. And so when you're out there and you're showing a buyer, they have to make a really quick decision right now. And so it's really important that they understand the contract. And I recommend to you that, because most everything we do is online, I recommend that you go through, just set an appointment with your buyer to actually go through the contract before they even make an offer. And make sure they totally understand. That way, when they have to sign it and they have all of 15 minutes to get their offer in, you're not making a mistake and that they understand it. So I really think that's a good rule of thumb, to go through the entire contract with the buyer. And letting them know what the property search is like. Now, right now, we're probably not going to go see 6 properties because there just aren't there isn't that much inventory. But right now, they'll probably make arrangements to meet there. You'll tell them how we have to have masks and gloves. And if they don't have their own masks and gloves, you'll provide those. And just basically explain to them what the process looks like. The reason I say 6 houses is because in a normal market, 6 houses is about the most you can actually see without them just melding together. And then they forget which one they actually like or not. And I always like to keep the top one, their favorite, and number them. So that I always know which one is their number 1 house, so that at the end of the day, I can ask them if they're ready to move forward on their number 1. And then if they're not, I can ask them what it is that is keeping them from moving forward. And another good question when you're going out to look at property, a really good question to ask is like, so if we find the right property today, is there any reason why you won't make an offer? It's a really good question, because they might say, oh, I can't make an offer until my mom sees it. Well, then you just found out that mom needs to be on that appointment with you, right? So that's a good question. If we find the right property today, is there any reason that you can't move forward with an offer? Oh, no, we don't actually have the money. We have to sell our car to have earnest money. I mean, you'll find out a million things when you ask that question. Explaining the showing process, we've been through that. It's really different right now with the 30-minute windows. And I just tell my buyers, you know how you go in and you reserve a little spot on the grid? Have you seen that? where to set a showing, there's like a grid and you can see if there's a box that you can reserve. That is, it is part of the showing service to make sure that we don't have any overlapping showings right now during the pandemic. And so they're like in little 15-minute or 30-minute windows, you reserve a slot. And so I have a buyer right now that's looking like almost every day. And they're like, I love this house. Okay, I'll check the grid. Let's see where we can get in. And then I say, okay, I was able to reserve this time. And I'll tell them, but that is the expectation now. Those grids, a property comes on the market. Let's say it comes on the market Thursday morning. That grid for the weekend is probably filled up by the end of the day. And then if you go to the grid and you have a buyer and you didn't reserve a time, sometimes it's like, well, we actually can't get in to see that house because the grid is full. So you explain that process to them. Sooner the better to get out there and see the property before it builds up. And then you discuss the steps after finding a home. They need to understand that just because they found a home doesn't mean it already automatically has to pass inspection and appraisal and everything else they want. You don't even want them to ask for inspection items on the offer because that just puts them at the bottom of the list. You want to get it under contract and then go to the seller if there is something that needs to be done. An example, let's just say you're looking at a house and you can clearly see it has a terrible roof. You're not going to ask for a new roof in the offer, okay? You're going to get it under contract and then you're going to ask for the new roof in the inspection. Even if you said health and safety, you're still going to ask for it because you can and your buyer can. Every single contract says as is. I don't know that people don't understand that. It's in the contract, the property is sold as is. So everything that you ask for, putting that you're going to buy it as is, it's already in there. So you don't ask for inspection items before because then it just like, we don't like that dead tree in the front yard. We want you to remove that dead tree. Then you don't want to put that in the offer. You want to put that in the inspection request because it's a lot more difficult for the seller to put their property back on the market and start over. And this is not bait and switch. You're not going in to have them rebuild the house. It's just necessary things, but you don't want to put them up front because it makes your offer look weaker. Does that make sense? That's what the inspection period's for. And you want to explain that to your buyer. We don't need to inspect the house before the offer. You have that process. And by the way, you do not have to provide an inspection report or any reason why it failed your inspection. It could be that you just didn't like the smell one day. Doesn't matter. It could be anything. You don't have to give a reason. You just have to cancel within the time period. Okay. Same on loan condition, guys. You don't have to tell them. We're canceling on loan condition. We don't like the loan. Doesn't matter if they weren't approved or maybe they actually went and found a different house, but you do not have to tell them. So that is the advantage of the buyer. The seller has no outs. That's something that's important. If your seller signs an offer, there is no out. The only out a seller has is if they can't, they have the opportunity to provide clear title if there's a title problem. But unless it is written in the contract that the seller has the right to cancel, the seller cannot cancel. That's really important to know. Because we've had situations where like a seller accidentally signed the offer. And guess what? A signed offer is a contract. They can't cancel. They say, oops, I didn't mean to sign that one. It was $50,000 low. We were countering. I accidentally signed it. Guess what? They just sold that house for $50,000 less. And you've got an E&O claim. Okay. So the seller can't cancel. Just remember that. And we'll talk about it more in sellers. But now you've told them basically how the whole process is going to go. And now for the setting up appointments and the actual showing of property. And this is a little bit different because of the pandemic. When we're not in a pandemic, it is really good for you to be able to have people in your car so you can talk to them and you can find out what they want and you know, build that rapport and that relationship. But we can't do that right now. We have to meet at properties. That's what we're required to do. And so these things, you know, when you do have people in your car, make sure that you have a clean car and you don't run out of gas. That's really embarrassing when you run out of gas and you have somebody. Even if they're following you, you don't want to run out of gas. We can't do printouts and property things right now. We have to do PDFs and do them virtual because we're not supposed to provide paper so much during the pandemic. So those types of things we're emailing right now, all of the printouts for the properties and things like that. I still have my top 5 list with me. Water and snacks during the pandemic, we can't even do that at open houses. But when we're out of the pandemic and things are more normal and you do have people in your car, it's fun to have a little package of whatever you bring along with you to make that experience more fun. I used to, and I still do, I just have a lot of them right now because I haven't been able to use them, but I get the toddler toy Happy Meal at McDonald's. And if you ask for the under 3, it's baby safe. And then I usually keep 2 or 3 of those in my glove box so that if I'm with somebody that has children, I can pop out a cute little toy or something for them. Then they always look forward to seeing me. Their kids always wonder what they're going to get the next time. So that was kind of fun and gave me a use for my Happy Meal toys. But honestly, it's whatever you want to do to establish your brand and make it an experience, because people want a fun experience. It is all about the home shopping experience, and you want it to be fun. You want that to be a resource, you to be the resource that they go to when they want to ask questions and things about their property that they're looking at. So top 10 tips just for successful tours. And a lot of these still apply today, even more so. So call and check availability before scheduling a showing. I mean, you really do have to do that right now, especially because there might be 8 offers in on a property, and it might be already $30,000 above list or whatever, and your person is FHA and they need seller contribution. That's just not even going to be worth going out there and disappointing your client. You don't want to get them to a house that they absolutely love and can't buy. That makes them unhappy with you. So make sure that you know that, the availability before you go. Make comments on your own sheets. And this is important. If you write down the code to the lockbox, don't do it on the sheet with the address, just like you don't put your PIN number on your debit card, okay? We actually had a client once that got, this is terrible. The client got the lockbox and went in the house and changed the carpet out before closing. We're like, oh no. And so we had to provide a paid in full receipt to the seller, and just in case the deal didn't close, and they had to sign away every right they had to the funds and the money that they spent on that carpet. So yeah, they actually got the PIN number and went in and changed the carpet before closing. So boy, that was a bad phone call to get from the listing agent. It's like, oh yeah, it was our buyer. Our buyer did that. That was like 15 years ago. These stories you never forget. Anyway, always ring the doorbell. Even if it says it's vacant, you want to announce yourself and you want to say, hello, realtor, a couple of times. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this for 34 years. I have walked into every possible scenario you can think of. Absolutely. So you definitely want to announce yourself, even when you have an appointment, because you never know when somebody might be there. And I've had naked people come out of the bathroom before. I've had people romping in the bedroom before. You're going to run into all kinds of stuff. So announce yourself when you go in the door. One time, and this wasn't an announcement thing, but it was weird. So this guy, he was dressed in lingerie, and we were there, my client and I, and he followed us around the entire showing eating Jell-O. Very, very, well, it was just gross. Anyway, so yeah, we couldn't get out of that house fast enough. And we decided that must have been the tenant and he didn't want to move. But I tell you what, a man eating Jell-O in an erotic way in a little onesie thing is like not my idea of a good time. So that was weird. But you'll get your own stories, and there's always going to be some weirdos out there, which reminds me to, at the end of this, we're going to talk a little bit about safety. But so you always want to be quiet too. And especially now. So, most people have cameras in their homes right now. And the Real Estate Commission has actually come out with an opinion that it is not appropriate or legal for your seller to listen in on a conversation that has to do about the purchase of their home. But we don't know whether they're listening or they're not. So the best thing to do is just tell your clients that they probably have some, surveillance devices in their home, it would be a good idea if they want to talk about making offers or anything specific to them that you do it outside. And don't stand in front of the Ring doorbell when you do it. So because everybody's watching, and there are actual cases that are coming up about this stuff. You also can't go into anybody's house and video for somebody without permission. Keep that in mind. If you're going to go and tour a home for a buyer and you're doing a video, you need permission, and never put it on Facebook. So that's important. Anyway, but when you're touring, you want to be quiet. You want to listen to your client and what they're talking about. And you want to point out the features. Like, you don't need to point out this is the kitchen. You would point out this kitchen has a chef's oven. It's a double oven, which will really help with your entertaining, if that's what they like to do. Feature benefit selling. The 6 to 7 homes we talked about ranking. I like to rank properties when I'm doing more than one, but the way it is right now when we're showing, it's like one property comes up or maybe 2, and we know if they're going to make an offer, if they like it or not. But in the normal market, when you get to the point where there's like, wow, there's like 19 properties that fit the criteria of this person, pick the best 6. And then as you're going out, keep the number 1, ask them which one is number 1, which one's on top, which one's on top. And it always gives you the option. And then you can ask, are you ready to make an offer on your number 1? And if they say no, you can say, okay, so let's talk about that. Let's talk about the things it doesn't meet. And you've got your top 5 list, and this is where you're learning. You find out then that the finished basement actually was a non-negotiable, because they won't buy the house without it. So you learn and they learn along the process, and ranking them is a good rule of thumb. You're not going to have a problem encountering other real estate agents right now in the house, because we have a law that there are no overlapping showings. And so if somebody's in the house, you have to wait until they come out. And if you're in the house, they have to wait until you come out. But with 15-minute windows, it's hard, and 30-minute is more common, but we've seen 15. I have a really hard time getting through a big 4-bedroom, huge 3,000 square foot house in 15 minutes with the client. I think that's hard, but that's what we're having to do right now. The good thing is, if you've done a good needs analysis, you know if it hits the marks, and then you can get them to look at all the most important features, and then they have the opportunity to inspect if they win it in the contract. And then in normal markets, you're going to get feedback. We don't get a lot of feedback requests right now, because usually they're going under contract so quickly. But I just want to warn you, be careful what you say with your feedback. Make sure that if you say it, it's your opinion, and that if your buyer says it, you make sure that it's their opinion. Be known. There's always a lawsuit behind every problem there ever was, and there was a situation where an agent gave feedback that the client didn't like the floor plan or the decorating in the house. And then later that client wanted to go back and buy that house, but the seller wouldn't sell it to him because they were insulted. But the buyer didn't give the agent permission to tell them their opinion of the seller's decorating. And the buyer agent sued the buyer agent for costing them that house because it gave feedback without permission. That's a long story. To make it short, just be sure you have your buyer's permission to give their feedback, and otherwise make sure it's clear that it's yours. So you can say, I did not think it flowed well, not my buyer. Does that make sense? Because you're giving them your feedback or your buyer's feedback. Just make sure they know which one it is. Then on page 8 here, we already talked about benefit selling. Have you guys, those of you who have been in sales before have probably been real familiar with feature benefit selling. We do the same thing with ourselves. You know, our knowledge. We are knowledgeable about the market. We are great negotiators. You know, that's the features people want to see, that because they're going to benefit from those things. So when you're looking in the house, and the thing to just practice on this, you know, when you're, you know, even around your own home, when you're looking at the features, think of the benefits and how you would talk about them, because that's how the sales process works for your buyers. And then you watch for their buying signals. And it's funny because some of them you don't really think are buying signals. So obviously comparing other houses to it is a buying signal. Their body language, you can really tell. And usually when they go into a house and they don't like it, you know right away. And if they love it, you know right away by looking at that body language. Then Then they might say, why is the seller selling this house? That's, they're like, well, would we want to sell it too? Why are they selling? That shows that they are considering. Asking questions about terms, details of HOA, taxes. When they want to know details, they're considering. And a dead giveaway is when they place their furniture. Here's where the couch would be, and when they're really starting to imagine themselves in the house. We hear a lot of discussing remodel ideas, going to open concept, or now we're even hearing people putting up some walls to create some additional rooms for home office and things like that. Because I don't think we're ever going to be back in the office like we were before. That's what the whole industry is telling us, is that we are going to be working at home. Some in the office, but even post-pandemic, it's not going to be back to the way it was ever, back 100%. When your client doesn't want to leave, that is another buying signal, because they really are just, they're hesitant to leave. They really are considering it. And that's really hard when you have these little showing windows. And so we just tell them, if you're feeling, positive about this house, you do have that inspection period where you can be here, nobody else is coming, and you can make sure that it feels good too at that time. Because 15 minutes is a hard amount. I mean, that's hard. Okay, I'm going to spend $500,000 and I only have 15 minutes to think about it. Now, that's uncomfortable for most people, and much more uncomfortable for those people that are more contemplative and really have to think about a process. When you look at the style of people, the S style is the most common in society. And that is the person that actually needs to think about decisions. They don't like being forced and held to a quick decision. And so you really have to give them the why behind it and show them their options. And like I said, that is most people you're going to run into are those contemplative S type of personalities that like to think about it. Every now and then, it's only 10% of the time you're going to run into somebody that's like, I don't need you to read the contract, just show me where to sign. That high drive, only about 10% of the time. And that's another class, but we'll talk about that later. Just know that you've got to give your people a reason to make a decision, and give them the comfort of that they still have different opportunities to make sure it was the right decision for them. We don't get a lot of cancellations. It's just hard for people, 15 minutes, it's just hard. So asking questions about other offers, that's something that we hear right now. And we'll tell somebody, there's 8 offers in, and we know for sure that you're going to have to go 15 over. It depends on what the listing agent will tell you. Sometimes they'll tell you specifically where they are, and sometimes they won't. A good question is, if we came in at X, would that be competitive? And they might say, no, you're going to have to do better than that if they have higher. So that is something, that's a question you might be able to fish with. Asking for a second showing is something that we see more in other markets. We usually don't get that opportunity right now, but when they want to see it again, that's definite buying sign. And this is the big one though, is when they have objections. When they start talking about their objections, instead of just saying, nope, it's not the right house. When they start talking about, what do you think about the traffic out here? You think it's too loud? They're considering it. And so if you can overcome those objections and help them, you don't want them to be unhappy in the end. You always want them to be happy so that you get the referral. So if it's truly something you think is negative, like I was with a buyer just the other day, we were looking in the backyard, and I tell you, there was no more than 5 feet between the back of their house and this big, huge wall that blocked a highway. And my people wanted a big yard. They have big dogs. They have a hot tub. It was awful. And I knew that they didn't want this house. And it's like, no, let's leave. This isn't the right house. And you know it too, when it's not the right house. You don't want to be the decision maker, but you're going to know it if you've done a good needs analysis, if it's the right house or not. So I wanted to talk about personal safety, because this is an issue that it doesn't matter if you are male or female. The last assault that I'm aware of was a male on male in Boulder. So just know that there are things that you can do to keep yourself safe. One of them is never let the client be between you and the exit, okay? It's your tendency to go up the stairs first when you're going upstairs, or go down the stairs first when going into the basement, but don't. Let the client go first, unless it's your best friend, but if you're just not not completely comfortable with that client, you make sure that you keep yourself between the door and the client. And I had a situation once where the client, it would not let me out of the house, and until I kissed him. And it was a terrible situation. And so I did actually have to do it. And I got out of the house, and then I went and turned him in. But you just have to know that I had violated that rule. The client got between me and the door. So just keep an eye on that. And that actually was somebody that I knew pretty well. So you never know, be careful. And it's a really good idea to carry like mace or bear spray or something like that. We always have bear spray because we hike all the time. So it's like, it's 30 feet, you're in trouble. Anyway, other things that you can do, if you feel uncomfortable, you can call your office and say, hey, I need you to get the red file on 323 Main and let me know what that legal description is, or something like that. The red file. When you say, I need you to get the red file on this address, that's code, realtor code for send the cops to this address. I have a problem. Okay. One thing I noticed that is really cool.
Is that a universal, like everybody knows that?
Supposed to be.
Code?
Yeah. So when you go to your office, ask them.
Okay.
If they're using it, because our office does, and it has been for years, like over 30 years. So, but if there's somebody that hasn't been taught, that it could fall through the cracks. But we do have other sources. And like I was out at a showing the other day, and it was apparently my husband, he was at a showing, and he's got it set up electronically. If you go in on the electronic block box and you don't check in, and I was getting texted saying, my husband is at this location. He did not check in. Here's his number. I need to check on him. And so I'm like, you okay, hon? I'm like, yeah. But so there are some different systems that you can do for safety. I've never had a big problem except for the kiss, and I carry my mace, and I when you go through the process of making sure that somebody's pre-approved, and that means they've given their social security numbers, all their information to the lender, then you know that you've got somebody that probably is legit. You never meet anybody at a vacant property alone, ever. Doesn't matter. I mean, if you've never met them before and you don't have a relationship, don't do that. If you do need to be in a situation where you were going to meet somebody at a vacant property, take somebody with you. Find somebody from your office, from your team. Just don't go alone. That's when bad things can happen. So, and also I would say that if you're a female, and this is a really big thing they teach in personal safety, and you will see so many sexy pictures that realtors put on their cards. Don't put cleavage on your business card, okay? That is one of the worst things that you can do, is have a sexy business card. You put that sexy picture all out there, and some weirdo's gonna want to have you meet him at a vacant house, right? So don't do that. Anyway, so you're showing property, and hopefully you're having a few times out, you've done a good needs analysis, so you're not having to spend, weeks and weeks finding the right property, but you got to bring your buyer to a decision. And so that's when you ask about the top 5. We've hit this. You can see, are they ready to make an offer on number 1? That's one way you can get them to make a decision. Here's a really good question. When a buyer is like wondering if they should come in, they want to think about it, should we not? This question is perfect. How would you feel tomorrow if you didn't make the offer and the property was gone? If they say, oh, I'd be okay, then it wasn't meant to be, then there's no reason to push. But if they say, oh, it would be horrible. If somebody else got it, I would be devastated. Well, then they obviously need to make an offer. So that question can tell you their level of commitment for that property. And then if you still run into a problem, interest rates are great, prices are going up, everything points to a sense of urgency in our current market. So I honestly think if you've got people in a neighborhood today that are paying $15,000, $20,000, $30,000, even more sometimes for those properties close, then they become comps. So that person that's looking in that neighborhood now that can't spend that 15 to 30,000 may be priced out of that neighborhood in 3 months. Does that make sense? The comps will catch up and the neighborhood goes up. So just try to get them under contract when they are comfortable and they can qualify and they've got an opportunity. And that sense of urgency, creating that urgency really does kind of help, especially if somebody is just has a hard time making a decision, but they love the house. I say, don't ever try to sell somebody something that you don't think they're going to absolutely love, because they will hate you later and you want their referrals. And remember, a happy seller, refers their agent 4 times since closing, and buyers, they refer their agent during the whole process. That's the best time to get referrals, is when they're active. They're talking about it to their friends at work, and there's lots of opportunity that you can really, leverage that, like sending flowers to their office when their loan is approved or when they get the contract, or, there's a lot of things you can do to give them attention that will also help you as well. But so the number one thing though that they really want us for is negotiation, because if they find the house, they can fall in love, but they need us to help them get it, to negotiate, to get it under contract, and to get them to the closing table. So things that you can do to help them with their offer price is the NAR RPR report. I will pull one of those for almost every house a buyer ever wants to make an offer on. We're going to go through that next week in detail, but if you don't have it already set up, I would go to www.narrpr.com. It's National Association of Realtors Real Property Resource. Go in there and set up your profile and everything. And that way, when we go over it next week, it'll be really familiar. And you can go in and do like a report on your own house and stuff. It is one of the most amazing tools we have as realtors for sellers, also for buyers. You can pull this report for any buyer and they see so much. If it's a flip, you can even see the before and after pictures on those reports. So that's really fun too. Good tool, really good tool. The MLS data. This has been something we've used repeatedly in this market. If you look at the sold versus list price, and you've got a buyer there wondering where to come in, and you look at the stats for that particular area, you can say, well, this area has been selling for 102.3%. So that means you need to come in about 2.3% over list price to be average for the area. So that gives you an actual statistic that things have been selling for. So those are really good numbers. And people like numbers when they're trying to make that decision. It helps a lot. And then sometimes just comps on similar homes, and just to show them. In other markets, sometimes you actually have the opportunity to go and preview other homes that have similar price range. You say this house is used, and we say, is our house being used as a springboard for others? Well, you can also do that. You say, okay, so this house is the same price and it backs to a busy road. Show them that comp, and you can get this one right now that doesn't for the same price. And so you can look at those similar properties and use them to help create urgency too. Those are all parts of negotiation. But I would highly recommend that you watch for the RENE, which is the Real Estate Negotiation Expert class. I'm going to try to bring that in this year. It is 16 credit hours, and it's only $200. So you get a lot of bang for your buck. It's an awesome class. If that one isn't available, there's the CNE, which is the Certified Negotiation Expert, which is also a really awesome class through NAR. So both of those are probably some of the best classes I think you could ever take in your career, those negotiation classes, because they really do teach you how to be a good negotiator. And it's not so much negotiating with your client as it is negotiating with the other agents and the other people in the transaction. And too, because it matters. When you are in a situation, let's say you have a listing and you're looking at several different offers and you're looking at the agents that brought them in. If there's an agent there that you know is super difficult to work with and you've had a problem with in the past, you think you're not going to tell your seller about that? Absolutely you are. Same thing with sellers. If you're looking at, or buyers looking at making an offer and you know that agent is a beast, you're going to try not to get them on that property. The agent does make a huge difference in the transaction. whether your buyer gets the deal or your seller, you know, finds the best offer. So it makes a huge difference. If you have a bad reputation in the business, your client's going to suffer for it. Make sense? It's true. It's true. And we're not out here to be adversarial. Being an adversarial person will not put your buyer in a good light. Some people come into this business and they think they've got to fight for their buyer. No, the best thing to do is be nice, to negotiate, to get the best for everybody. A win-win. A win-lose is never the best. So, so don't think that you're an adversarial person. You are the advocate, and you catch a lot more flies with honey. And that applies today as well as it does then. And so this is not wine, by the way, it's kombucha. Too early for one. Let's talk about the strategies to secure your sale, the closing. And this is where you really come into play, because you're going to hold this deal together. This is where it's time for you to shine as a professional. They can find a house. They could even probably go under contract with the listing agent, but getting it to the closing table is the biggest deal. And so these are the 4 things that you want to make sure that you keep on top of during this transaction. Clear and constant communication. And that means all the key players. If somebody's going out of town, you make sure you know about it. If you're going out of town, you make sure you cover your bases and somebody's covering your business. Real Estate Commission requires that if you are going to be out of touch for over 24 hours, that you have somebody else handling your business. And so you've got to make sure that you've got those bases covered, because if something's going to go wrong, it'll probably happen when you're not available. And then you check in on the expectations of all the key players and make sure that it's all understood. The co-op agent, that is a key player, and you are a key player. But sometimes it's up to you, and you've got to actually check in. Now, you're probably not going to remind a co-op agent that if you're the seller's agent to turn in an inspection request. But certainly if you're the buyer's agent, you don't have their title work yet, you're going to call up and find out where it is. You want to keep on top of the other agent, the buyer. You want to make sure they don't do anything to sabotage their deal. You stay on top of the title company, make sure that you're getting the information that you need, staying on top of the lender, staying on top of the insurance company, making sure the quote is coming out. They have a certain amount of time to confirm their quote. You want to make sure that the buyer doesn't get to closing and find out that their homeowner's insurance just jumped up $100 because they have a lot of claims. That's something you can find out. And that's why you have that insurance deadline. Put that insurance deadline really close to your loan approval deadline, because that's where it should be, because the insurance company has a certain amount of time to decide that their estimate was just an estimate and they're going to raise that rate. And you don't want to get to closing and have a unhappy buyer because the insurance was so much higher. It used to happen a lot, and we got that changed and put into the contract. Insurance companies, inspectors. So if the inspector is doing a report, when are you going to get the report? They're just going to give it to the buyer. Just make sure that you understand all of the pieces and set those expectations, and then you'll have much less problem. It's when you don't know what's hitting you that you get blindsided with something. And then tracking dates and details. This is hugely important. And if I'm ever the person that's reviewing your contracts, I'm going to bulk. If I see that the date is going to move to the next business day, I like to have all dates solid in ink on the schedule. I don't like movable dates. I'll tell you, that's where mistakes happen. And let's say that you thought it was a national holiday, but it really wasn't a national holiday, and you missed a deadline. And it could cost you a ton of money, especially on inspection. If they wanted to ask for a new furnace and now they can't because you missed that deadline, then you might pay for that new furnace. So every single contract that I ever write, I have solid dates. If I need to amend dates, I do, and I put them in my calendar so that it never happens that I don't know what day it is. And CTM reminds you too. There are so many different things that will remind you of those important dates. Don't let one get by. But if it's not solid, it won't remind you. So it has to be solid. And then finally, maintaining a problem-solving attitude. That's one of the things I see most often with agents that are newer in the business. Something goes wrong and you don't have the experience to know all the possible solutions. So go talk to somebody with more experience and find out, you know, that if, for example, let's say that the appraisal didn't come in. And so the $2,000 that the seller was going to pay on behalf of the buyer, they're not going to pay anymore because they have to lower the price. And now the buyer doesn't have enough money and, oh, darn, let's cancel the deal. But instead of that, go to the lender, go talk to somebody, say, hey, lender, maybe we could up the interest rate just a little bit. Would they still qualify? Okay, they would. Well, then you could combine, you could contribute the $2,000. We came down on the price, and so it'll all work. There many times there is a solution, and you will learn more about those solutions as you get experience. And so reach out to the people that are around you that have that experience to help find the solution, because many times you'll terminate a deal that you don't have to when you actually could have gotten it to the table. And when you can get a closing to the table that is a really difficult closing like that, you make a huge difference for somebody. They become a homeowner. They have their dreams come true, and they're not going to forget you. That's really where our value comes, and that's where the reward comes, when you've made it a huge difference for somebody that they wouldn't have been able to do without you. So that's one of the best parts of our business. So maintain a problem-solving attitude. Don't give up. And then lastly, I'm just going to cover the 7 major things that can cause your deal to crash. Just a little thing, okay? Just 7 little things. So here's the first one. Doubts. Whether you're working with a buyer or you're working with a seller, there's buyer or seller remorse. They're all going to have doubts. So let's just say we're in our current market. Seller takes the deal. Buyer's under contract. Next day, the morning, you know, the buyer paid $15,000 over the price, and they're like, oh my gosh, they call you like, oh, we're really worried. You think we paid too much? Oh no, do you think we paid too much? Okay, so then let's say you represent the seller and the buyer only paid 15 over. The seller calls you the next morning. Do you think we could have held out for more? Do you think we might have been able to get 20? So you see, it's the same exact situation, but each client is going to have doubts. And so the best thing that you can do, tell your buyer, you know, it's perfectly normal to question yourself tomorrow. So if you have questions, call me, but just remember that you're going to be out of that basement in 3 weeks. And, you know, then you point to getting away from the pain. It really helps them with the doubts. But knowing they're going to have those feelings and telling them about it, it really helps to comfort them the next morning when they wake up and they have them. They're like, oh, yeah, our agent said we would feel this way. And we still have our inspection and you know, we still get to make sure this house is the right house for us. So that's important. No matter what, they're going to have doubts. Potential oversight. And we kind of talked about that a little bit already. That's missing a date. If you miss a date, it can be disastrous to your deal, especially if you have somebody that's got like a backup position and they want to have the buyer cancel and you miss a date and it ends up costing them the deal. It can be just devastating, and it can be financially devastating too if you get sued for that. And when you're a buyer's agent, you're responsible for keeping track of those dates and all of those things. So remember that you have that responsibility, and they can sue you if you mess up. Inspection. You know, that is the second point of the sale. They go in and then they tear it all apart. And so you tell your buyers, this is the part where you're going to, you know, have your doubts, and you're going to find out about the house. No house is perfect. And you're going to find out about the imperfections that this house might have. But just know that if it's anything major that you can't deal with, you have the option to get your money back. And if not, then you'll have the option to deal with it. So just making sure that they understand that the inspection is an important part. And if you're working with an inspector that goes in, and I did have an inspector once that's like, you know, you really should go back to the listing agent and renegotiate this price because it's in bad condition. And never again did I want that inspector. You know, when they start telling your buyer how to negotiate their deal based on the condition, that's not an inspector you ever want to refer. They need to stay out of that. Just give the facts and give the report. And usually a good inspector will explain how things can be fixed. And if it's not a major issue, they don't make a major issue over it, because that is, it is so hard on a buyer to go through the inspection where they tear it all apart. So the better you are at setting that expectation, the better your conversion, your percentage rates will be for holding your deals together, because they'll be expecting it. Appraisal, typically the seller is the one that needs to keep the appraisal together and meet that. But if you have a buyer and they're paying X over list price, and I mean, you want that appraisal to come in, right? Especially if they've got gap coverage and they're going to have to pay cash between the appraisal and the price. You have every reason to be a player in that appraisal process. And the listing agent's going to be contacted to do the appraisal, but you can always reach out and to the listing agent and to the lender, and you can reach out to the appraisal, the appraiser. The lender can't, just like the listing agent can. If you're having any issues with value, you can do that as well. So usually the listing agent doesn't have a problem if you're trying to bring in the appraisal, but they will have a problem if you're questioning it and trying to get it down so you can renegotiate in a different market. So you have to kind of be careful with that. Another thing with appraisers, you can never tell an appraiser what the value needs to be. You can tell them what your contract value is, but at the point that you tell them what the value needs to be, they consider that we're crossing the line, and that is grounds for censure, punishment, if we tell an appraiser what to appraise at. So anyway, just keep that in mind. And loan approval, we talked a little bit about that. You don't have to give them a good reason, but you can cancel on the loan objection just because you don't like the loan. But you don't really want that to happen. You get way down to the end, you want the closing. So here's things that you want to make sure that you tell them. And your lender probably is too, but you want to just make sure they know it too. Don't apply for a credit card or a loan, co-sign or do any credit inquiries during the loan process. Don't miss any payments. I actually had a seller once that thought because their house was under contract, they didn't make their payment. And they got a 30-day late and then had to wait a whole year to close on a replacement property. So you want to tell them not to miss any payments. Don't change employment. That can be a problem. Now, if they have an employment change that's not voluntary, there's options for that. If they're in the same line of work, many times the lender can work with them to get the pay stubs that they need to go ahead and close in a fairly timely manner. I think they need 2 pay stubs or something like that for the new job. Don't spend your closing money. Yeah, if you have to have your down payment money, don't go out and buy a new washer and dryer. Don't change banks or make any deposits without documentation. And I would add to that, not to receive any foreign money outside of the country without the lender being part of that process. Because we had a Chinese buyer once that got frustrated, and her dad wired in her down payment funds, and it was significant. It was about $50,000, and all of a sudden that $50,000 could not be used in the transaction at all. And so you want to make sure that the lender's part of that process. It's all has to do with Homeland Security and the money coming into the country. It has to be done right. In that particular situation, it worked out. The agent had enough money to loan the buyer. Seriously, the agent covered it. So don't make any major purchases. Stay in touch with the buyer's lender and get your weekly updates. Even though they've been pre-approved and stuff, it's a really good idea just to make sure and get those weekly updates and give weekly updates to your client. And then as far as just, if you have a buyer that gets denied, it's a terrible phone call to have to make. And even if they were pre-approved, they sometimes can get denied if things change and it wasn't quite, it just can happen. They can lose jobs, things happen. And if that does, then you always want to make sure that you put that buyer on a plan and explore options so that you can help them get through this, get over it, grieve the process, and get back on with it later so they have a plan to succeed. Hopefully that doesn't happen to you too often, but it's really awful when you have a buyer that gets really excited and then they can't go through with the process. So to really give them closure on that, you've got to have them on a plan so that they can accomplish their goal. And that way you can usually keep the buyer too for later. So that's the loan approval process. And then again, just staying in touch with all the key players during the whole process. If you're going out of town, you have to make sure that everybody knows. Watch your contingencies. Those are things that can derail your deal. Financing is a contingency, inspection is a contingency, and so is appraisal. So when you see somebody that comes in, like they want to make an offer on a home sight unseen, well, then the listing agents say, well, then you have to remove all the contingencies, and they're just going to want to cancel. That means making the earnest money hard, waiving inspection, cash deal, waive appraisal. All of those things might get you sight unseen, but you're going to have to guarantee you'll close. Otherwise, most sight unseen contracts don't succeed. So you can't really get them in this market. Other contingencies, of course, a home to sell, that can be a big one. But I don't necessarily think that it's impossible. In this market, everything is selling. So if they have a home to sell, you just look at any market. Actually, look at your home that you're selling and the home they have to sell. If their house is easier to sell than your house, then you might consider it. So let's just say that you've got, a 10-acre ranch 50 miles out east, and they have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car garage in a little neighborhood, that's 389,000 with a yard. Which one's going to sell the fastest? Most likely the one that's in town with the yard. So if they're putting an offer on your property out here that's hard to sell and theirs is easy to sell, you might have your seller consider that. So that's what a contingency is trading one property for another. So, okay, so I don't have to sell mine anymore, but we got to sell yours. So what's yours like? And that's why when you come in with the contingency, you come in really strong to show how, if you're already under contract, how strong that contract is. And if you're not under contract, which sometimes still gets accepted if it's a really sellable property. You put it on the market, it's sold. And the seller just didn't want to put their property on the market because they didn't want to be homeless, but it's sold. And you know that that's probably the case. If you're the listing agent on one property looking at a really good contract, and that buyer is going to put their property on the market the very next day, and it is a great sellable property, it's probably fine as a contingency, as long as they're reasonable. We have had before when a buyer came in with a property they needed to sell, we'll look at their market analysis, and this was a little bit different market, but we said, okay, we will accept your contingency, but we want you to price it differently. We want you to price your home $5,000 less, and then we'll accept your contingency. And we've had that happen before too. So you really are looking at that side of the transaction as well when you have a contingency. And that's part of being a good negotiator, just looking for which is most likely to close, and because that's what you want, the deal that's most likely to get to the closing table. But then it's not over. So let's talk a little bit about what happens after closing. Because the worst complaint we ever get from people that have been through the process is, yeah, my realtor was my best friend, and then after closing, he got his check and I never heard from him again, or her. You hear that a lot. In fact, it's really sad that only 12% of people actually follow up with their clients after closing. It's terrible. But you can be the exception and make sure that you do, and build a database of people that really, really think of you as their agent. Like I think I told you last week, I have a family I've done 16 transactions for. And there are people in their family I've done transactions for that weren't born when the first ones were happening. So that's what you want. You want those. It's kind of like when you hit a line of gold or a line of silver and you're a miner, and you hit that line and it goes on and on and on. You want 3 or 4 of those lines of silver or gold that you continue to reap the rewards year after year after year after year. So here's what happens after closing. You call your buyer to make sure that they got possession and that everything went smoothly. These days, you get possession at closing usually, but it used to be almost all the time they wanted those 3 days. And now we do the post-occupancy agreement. So you know when they're supposed to take possession, but make sure it goes smoothly for them. Check with them that day. Visit them with a moving gift after they're settled in. That's really fun. do the before and the after pictures. That's super fun. And it's a great time to just remind them that they're your agent as well. We've done, and not in pandemic times, but we've done housewarming parties for our people. Love to do that. We go get a cake with their picture of their house on it. And then we ask for an invitation list, which is a great strategy, by the way. And we invite all of their friends and we do all of the work and hold their housewarming party for them. And it almost always ends up in a transaction or two from the people that we meet. The title commitment is your responsibility to make sure that they have the policy. So during the whole process, you get the title commitment. That is a commitment to issue the title policy. As their agent, your final job in the deal, your final responsibility is to make sure they actually did receive their title policy. So that usually comes like 6 weeks later. It's another great follow-up. Or you can just say, hey, I need to make sure you get your title policy. Will you please call me as soon as it comes in the mail? So you'll check on that. It's a perfect time to ask for referrals. When you're working with the buyer, you're fresh on their mind. This is the time that you want to ask. And then you put them in your sphere of influence and you make sure that they hear from you and that they are reminded that you are their real estate resource every 16 days or less. And that is how you will be able to maintain a client database, grow a client database, and be the realtor of choice. So buyers are hard right now, and I hope that this module has given you a little insight on how to help in this crazy market. But buyers are awesome because you can make their dreams come true. And I don't think there's any reward in real estate greater than seeing somebody that didn't really think that they could be a homeowner to become a homeowner, and they won't forget you. So any questions today? Let's see if I have any chat. Let me go in. I've been talking so much. Let's see chat. We have chat. Let's see what we have here. RENE, the real estate negotiation expert. Yeah, okay. Somebody had their internet down too. Sorry, Susan. It's awful. But I'm glad I made it through the whole class with my iPad, and my computer is on the fritz. So this class is recorded, and I will make sure and send out the information for you. The link, when I send out the materials for next week, you will also get the class descriptions, and it will have the link for today's class. So you can go and revisit any of the parts that you would like to. And let me know if I can help in any way. I'm at the Westminster office. So thank you for your time. Go get them. Win those contracts.
Thank you, Heidi.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Heidi. See you next week.
See you next week. For
Thank
sellers.
you. Thank you, Heidi.
Yes.
Bye. Bye-bye.